Presenting to you, Faust, Shi association. Synergy is flawed. Before I begin this video, I'd like to state that Shi-Faust is not an inherently Shi-T unit. It's just that Faust has two mechanics that are counterintuitive, specifically regarding her main mechanic, her arrows. To start, maximizing the value of her base attacks needs you to expend all 4 of your arrows. However, to maximize the value of her main gimmick, which is a staggering 444 damage increase on critical hit for her glimmering bow attack, you'd need to take 4 turns charging up her focus. To her credit, having the maximum stacks 4 of focus does give her 20 poise potency, which translates to a guaranteed critical hit, which then makes the attack incredibly reliable if you are willing to invest into getting the maximum focus. That being said, if you wish to expend all 4 arrows at their maximum damage potential, you would need to spend 20 turns into this strategy. To repeat, it's 20 turns for 4 attacks, with 16 turns spent unfolding and charging her bow, and 4 to shoot the maximum focus arrows. The main issue is that during the charging period, she cannot attack, clash, or use ego, as attacking would automatically make her use her skill 3-2, and using ego would cancel the charge, effectively deleting any focus she has. To the credit of this charging phase, she is not completely defenseless. When she is in her unfolded bow mode, she cannot be staggered by most means and generates a considerable amount of shield when she is attacked. However, you cannot ignore that it is still a cumbersome strategy to basically have a petrified sinner for 4 turns before each attack. This monumental investment of her actions must lead to the conclusion that the attack will do millions and billions and trillions of while it is still a sizable amount of burst damage, with the added utility of an increase in final skill power for the next turn should you successfully kill an enemy, the problem still lies in the investment required. To gain the 444% damage increase, you'd still need to consider that for 5 turns, you cannot clash, attack, or use ego to defend yourself. The only options of defense are the 60 shield or an evade. 4 turns in which any other unit can be dealing damage, clashing with the opponent, or applying useful statuses. All of which can potentially replicate the value of the damage this attack seems to boast for its only reason of existing, without the need to strike a pose for 4 turns. It is a downside to consider should you choose to follow this philosophy with this unit. That being said, if you wish to apply Faust in this way, I recommend to place Faust on the last of your unit Shi-lection, as she does not benefit with the extra skill slots while using this strategy. Now, consider this, rapid fire archer time, for only 8 turns. Now let's consider the other option of not prioritizing the 444% damage increase, and instead direct our attention towards the benefits of turning your enemy into a pincushion, and take advantage of the lodged arrow status effect. TLA is a status effect that somewhat consistently applies bleed potency, fragile, and defense down each turn, depending on the amount of arrows lodged. The expedient expenditure of arrows will grant your skills 2 and 3 an 11 to 44% damage increase depending on the amount of arrows spent. Meaning for setups like these, it is ideal to have her 1. Spend all 4 of her arrows as soon as possible, and 2. Have an enemy that can live long enough to have 4 arrows lodged. Seeing as you are actually allowed to attack after each turn, I recommend putting your Faust as your first sinner and then only using 6 of the 7 sinners for each fight to give her an extra skill slot. To perform this strategy, you just need to invest 8 turns alternating between unfolding your bow and then shooting it the turn after. However, this time you can benefit with the extra skill slots, as the game checks only at the end of the turn if you have a defense skill, and in the turn afterwards if you have at least 1 attack skill primed to convert to the skill 3-2. Meaning that should Faust have 2 skill slots in each turn, you can use 1 for an actual skill and another for priming the bow. Though unfortunately, due to the nature of only checking at the beginning and the end of each turn, at a minimum this will still take 8 turns to complete. That in mind, you still have to dedicate a skill slot each turn to doing these actions instead of clashing, which means that in fights that require you to invest all your skills in clashing against your opponent's attacks, it will still be somewhat of a detriment to constantly sacrifice a skill slot for Faust. The benefits here are obviously the flexibility of being able to attack a clash or use ego with each turn, compared to waiting 4 turns to gain maximum focus. Playing her in this style makes her feel like a more consistent unit, instead of an animation that plays once every 4 turns. Despite of what style you choose to employ, the fault still lies with how her gimmick is designed. If you are able to recall 7 days into the past, you may notice that Faust's problems are in a similar disposition to Owl Gregor's. That in the game specifying the need to force the players to wait a turn before being able to progress towards the next step of their multi-step damage loop. With Faust in particular having the more glaring issue, unlike Gregor, who can still clash and fight while building up the appropriate status, and only having a refractory period that takes away his bonus abilities. Faust's downtime, on the other hand, is more debilitating, with her basically becoming staggered in order to draw her full strength, and therefore it is in this idling that can make her feel like a more cumbersome unit. Sadly, aside from her kit, her synergy with the other Shinners is also not that simple. A lone wolf archer that is in a team-based game. Finding friends is hard. If we are to consider what she provides, the bleed, poise, and proclivity to do nothing intermittently, she oddly makes a good fit for the P-Squad. Heathcliff's enmity pull is useful for diverting attention away from her, potentially freeing Faust to charge in relative safety. And Ishmael's assist attack, while unable to be applied to her during her focus turns, can still be used on other units to make up for her idling. Secondly, Kurokuma members can also benefit from the bleed potency applied to enemies with each turn an arrow is lodged, making her a decent auxiliary member, if you don't want to deal with the other 00 Kurokuma members. But in terms of pure synergy, she does not fully synergize in any composition. She works well as a self-contained support or auxiliary unit that hangs back with her bow to finish off low HP enemies for her life render passive, or as a unit with a very consistent method of applying various debuffs, mainly bleed. In her defense, this lack of synergy with others is very consistent with the Shi association MO that we have seen so far in Limbus Company. Even the initial trio did not have synergy with each other, only having identical requirement for their activations. You can place them in any team as filler, as again, they are also self-contained units, unlike Manager Dawn or the Hongyuan team that require other members to maximize their value. The main problem with Faust is not with her synergy with others, but with herself. Main points have been said, conclusion is imminent. I shall summarize. In conclusion, despite Faust carrying one weapon with 2 purposes, the dual-purpose nature of the weapon does not synergize with their constituent selves. A conscious decision needs to be made whether or not you want to be a long-range executor sniper or a very potent debuff applier. Trying to capitalize on both her focus and spent arrow buffs would just take too long for either to reach their fruition, leaving her feeling like a half-baked unit. While her kit does not have the ease of use that the other 000 units have in terms of access to their full potential, she still does deal an acceptable amount of damage. The conscious decision to use Faust either as a high burst damage archer or a rapid fire bleed applier is an appreciated extra layer of deliberation you have to consider when you add her to any composition. And I mean any, as she's not reliant on others to draw her full strength. Thank you for watching. Hydration is important. Drink lots of water.